Hello and welcome to my FPL Gameweek 22 deadline stream. In today's video we're going to be talking through my last minute plans for Gameweek 22 and my transfers, my captaincy and all that lovely stuff. So make sure you smash a like on the video, comment your transfers in the live chat. It's currently not long to the deadline, so do get your thoughts in the comment section, and I will let you know any thoughts that I have of your transfers with the deadline coming up. Don't forget it's 6 p.m. so this is what I'm thinking ahead of the deadline, and basically it's going to be a bit of long-term planning that's going to factor into this, because when it comes to it now, the chips are very, very important. The doubles, the blanks coming up, so they're all going to play a part, and therefore we have to think about that when it comes to our transfers in Game Week 22 and going forward. So it's a tricky one. Obviously Erling Haaland, will he start against Burnley? We don't quite know. Pep Guardiola's comments were not exactly conclusive. The same goes not a lot about Kevin De Bruyne, and if I get in De Bruyne this week, does it stop me from getting Haaland in 23 when it's the weekend against Brentford? Yes, it does. So I've had to think about that and not get KDB in 22. But I'll show you my transfer plans. I could even roll in 22 because I've got a Man City attacker that I can captain at home to Burnley, and that is Julian Alvarez. But with the comments made by Pep Guardiola that Erling Haaland will be in the squad, whether he'll be starting or not, we don't know. But if he gets 20 minutes, 30 minutes off the bench, you would imagine that would be for Alvarez. So it reduces the appeal of Alvarez, even though he'll probably start Julian Alvarez. It's just, will he get hooked off early? Does that lessen the appeal of Alvarez? Now, he's a forward in the game, so he's not going to get the extra point for a goal or the extra point for a clean sheet. But with Haaland being out of the team, Alvarez has been on penalties. So it's not the worst of captaincy shouts, but I also think it's not the best one. The best captaincy looks like it's either Foden or Richarlison, in my opinion, because Phil Foden, we're pretty confident will start the game. We're not sure about Kevin De Bruyne. Foden's been playing really well, played really well against Newcastle, unlucky to not get an attacking return. And so you feel like he's as nailed as they get in a City team. Obviously, with De Bruyne being back to start games, then that'll be a problem later down the line for Foden. But for this game at home to Burnley, Foden probably does start. So is it worth it? Because I'm looking at wildcarding possibly Game Week 24, and so I'll have to reassess then whether I go for another City mid anyway. So I'll only have this player probably for 2 game weeks, 22 and 23, and in that time, Man City have their game against Burnley at home and Brentford away. Do I think Foden starts both of those 2 games? Probably. It's not guaranteed, but there's a good chance he does. Now, with the other possible transfer in, Richarlison, this week he's a much better kind of certainty that he'll get points, because although the fixture is not as good as Burnley, Brentford are also not great defensively, so I don't mind Richarlison this week. The problem with Richarlison is obviously he'll blank in 26, which is not going to be an issue for me. If I wildcard in 24, I can just get Richarlison out of the wildcard anyway. The issue with Richarlison really is, do I think he's enough cover? And it's an okay fixture this week, Brentford. The week after, it's against Everton. All right, not the worst of fixtures, but I also look at it and think, well, I want Haaland for 23, so is it essential that I make a transfer this week? I could use those 2 free transfers to get Haaland. I can do it in one move because I've got 12 million in the bank. The problem I've got is Haaland going to be essential this week? Probably not. So therefore, can I get KDB this week? No. The thing about Richarlison is he better than a City attacker? Because Burnley at home is a great fixture, and if you get the right City attacker, then there'll be more upside than Richarlison, who does have really good form on his side. You'd hope he's on penalties, but James Maddison coming back could ruin that. So it's not the worst of options, but it's also not optimal, Richarlison, for the captaincy, and I do think City is where it makes a lot of sense. The problem I've got is, if I do bring in a midfielder, be that Foden or Richarlison or Jota, even if I don't captain Jota, it leaves me with a benching problem, because as you can see here, I've got Hwang Hee-chan, Taylor and Trippier. Now Trippier looks like he's going to be fine. was cleared by Eddie Howe after he came off in the Fulham FA Cup match. Should be okay for the game against Villa, but I expect Villa to score a few there, so tricky anyway for Trippier. Taylor is likely injured, but we wouldn't have played him anyway against Man City. And then, of course, Hwang Hee-chan is still out with the Asian Cup for South Korea. Now, funnily enough, South Korea, they have a game right at this point in time. They've got a game against Saudi Arabia. So if South Korea end up winning that game, then they'll get through into the next round. If they lose it, then maybe Hwang could come back sooner for Wolves than first anticipated. So it might be worth keeping Hwang just because of that. The issue I've got is if I wanted to sell Hwang, for instance, for my Foden or my Richarlison, that leaves a benching problem because then I have to bench one of Palmer, Saka, Gordon, Gross, Solanke and Watkins. Now, I don't want to do benchings for any of those, really. Gordon, maybe, because his form has been more about at St James's Park than away from home. So I could maybe bench Gordon away to Villa, but I don't like it because Gordon's been a really good player for me this season in FPL. I don't see any reason to bench him. So then I kind of think, okay, fine. It's not ideal, but if I wanted to get in Foden or Richarlison for another midfielder that doesn't involve selling Hwang, that doesn't involve benching Gordon, I could sell Pascal Gross. But it seems pretty ludicrous because Pascal Gross I only got in last week. He disappointed at home to Wolves, blanked, and he got Luton this week. Now selling anyone ahead of Luton is madness. Benching anyone against Luton is madness. So Pascal Gross looks pretty good for me this week, I think. But the question is, will it be easier to sell Gross than Hwang? Because next week I'll be in a situation where if I did get in, for instance, Phil Foden for Hwang Hee-chan, well, I'm benching Gross anyway next week because basically, let's say I got in Foden for Hwang. We'll just quickly do that for you people. So let's say Hwang to Foden, and then in this situation I'd bench Gordon. That's fine. All right, well then next week I've got the situation where I want to play Trippier. I'll probably want to play Taylor, even though it's a Burnley defence that haven't been great. They've got Fulham. Then I'll want to definitely play Gordon. So then who am I benching to start Gordon? Well, most likely from these players, it will be Pascal Gross. So therefore, how much use is Pascal Gross for me these next few weeks? Not a lot. And therefore, is it worth just bidding him off this week? Or just selling Hwang and benching Gordon and benching Gross again? I don't mind Foden this week because he looks like a good pick. Even with the doubles, you'd hope that you get most of the games. Obviously, he could get benched for some of them. But I do think that Foden's a better captaincy shout than Alvarez because if Haaland, as Pep has said, is going to be back for the Burnley game in the squad, then Alvarez could get less minutes. Therefore, Foden could be on the pitch for longer. But by the same token, if De Bruyne comes on for Foden, then that takes away his minutes. I just think with the extra point for the goal, even though Alvarez could be on pens, is 30 minutes of Haaland better than 60 minutes of Alvarez? Probably not, because to get Haaland in, you want to have him when he's starting, really. I know he can score a hat-trick in 20 minutes off the bench, but it's not ideal for a transfer in. If you already owned Haaland, then it'd be easier to just hold him and maybe not captain. But as someone who doesn't own Erling Haaland, I'm struggling to do it this week, so it might be next week. Now, you could look at it and say, oh, well, in that case, get De Bruyne this week. But I can only do that if I sell, for instance, a Saka or a Palmer. I have to sell quite an expensive mid for me to afford getting De Bruyne in and then also having the money to get Haaland in 23. So I've looked at it and thought, well, if I'd say did instead in 22, if I go back a step, let's say we got kept Gordon, let's say we got not Foden in, but instead we got in De Bruyne. Well, yeah, I can do that financially 22. To get Haaland, this is a situation. 6.9 million is not enough for me to get Haaland in 23. So I guess I could sell Watkins. But that week, he has Sheffield United. So I'm not really willing to do it. If I sold Watkins this week and then brought in Haaland, then sure, I'd be able to do it financially. But the issue is I don't want to do it this week because I'm not sure that Haaland will start against Burnley. And I think Watkins is fairly easy hold at the moment. So it's a really hard one. I think when I look at it, what makes the most sense for me is to be doing either Foden or Alvarez as my captain, because who do I fancy over Foden or Richarlison? Probably Foden, even though Richarlison won't be an issue for me if I'm wildcarding in 24. I just think City, you've got to have at least 2 City attackers, and at the moment I've got Alvarez and Alvarez only. I can't go for a Haaland based off if he's on the bench. De Bruyne for a similar reason, and it's hard for me to then afford Haaland in 23. So the only other City player is Phil Foden. So I'm pretty confident this week that my transfer is going to be Foden in. The question is, who is it for? Is it for Pascal Gross or is it for Hwang Hee-chan? Because if it is for Hwang Hee-chan, then the situation is, it's not too hard, because then I can just, bench Gordon. But it's easier if I sell Gross. So even though he has a fixture against Luton, I'm thinking just get rid of Gross while I can, because he's not a bad asset, but he's also not someone I'd have on the wild card in 24 anyway. So he was just a bad transfer for me for last week. I think I'm going to do Gross to Foden, keep Hwang on the bench, because then it stops me having the benching headache in 23 when I have to bench Gross against Palace. Therefore, Gross to Foden is my transfer, and I'll be able to afford very easily Alvarez to Haaland next week, because of the fact I'll have gone for Foden rather than gone for Kevin De Bruyne. So therefore, that's my transfer. 10.5 still in the bank. It's Foden in for Pascal Gross, and then next week we just do Alvarez out and Haaland in. Quite simply, that's fine. Plenty of money left, and I can start Foden over Hwang easily. So that is my transfer for game week number 22. Very quickly, we'll quickly run over my team. So you've got Areola in goal, Gabriel. I'm pretty confident Gabriel will start. If not, Trippier can come off the bench for him. Saliba against Forest also is pretty good, hopefully. Porro against Brentford. Palmer, Saka on the vice captaincy, and then it will be, when I bring him in, Foden on the captaincy. Alvarez will also be there, not on the vice captain, but just vice captain Saka. Gordon's there. I'm keeping him. I don't want to bench Gordon. It's as simple as that. I rate him against anyone, and Villa have not been the most solid defensively this season. Then Gross, he's going to go. It's a sad departure, but it has to be done for Foden. Watkins is up front there too, and Solanke is there alongside Mr. Alvarez. So hopefully not it's reduced for Foden, and so therefore that's our transfer. We've got Trippier who's fit, so therefore it's one playing player on the bench at least, and that's fine. That is my transfer for game week 22. Hope you have enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye everyone.